We're fast approaching the 1 year anniversary of the release of Christopher Nolan's epic biopic, Oppenheimer. And let me tell you, I can't remember the last time a film had such an instant impact on me like this one did. Upon leaving the theater, my immediate reaction to Oppenheimer was, that was one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. And also, this movie will go down as one of the best of all time. I'm genuinely trying to remember the last time a film had that same reaction on me, and nothing seems to come to mind. And trust me, I'm not one of those people who leaves the theater calling every movie one of the best ever. Usually with me, it takes time for things to sink in, for things to settle. But with Oppenheimer, it was a completely different story. Acclaimed director Christopher Nolan was just coming off releasing Tenet during the pandemic with a little bit of studio infighting due to Warner Bros. Doing the dual streaming theater release, while Nolan strictly wanted the movie in theaters. This led to Nolan walking away from a near decade-long relationship with Warner Bros. And opting to partner with Universal instead to make Oppenheimer. And the rest is history. Get it? Because it's a historical biopic? Man, that was awful, I'm sorry. I promise I'm not going to throw this word around in every one of my videos, and if I do, you guys can tear me apart. But Oppenheimer is a masterpiece. The writing, the cinematography, the performances, the score, the cast, my god, the cast. This is easily one of the most insane cast lineups ever assembled for a movie. Okay, you ready? Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Florence Pugh, Josh Hartnett, Rami Malek, Jason Clarke, Casey Affleck, Gary Oldman, Alex Wolff, Josh Peck. Okay, I'm not gonna try to name everyone, but that's not even the entire list. It's no wonder why so many actors took a pay cut to be in this film. They knew this was about to be something special, and to their credit, they were right. And who can forget the Barbenheimer phenomenon, the one time the internet brought everyone together. For being a 3-hour biopic that featured no action sequences, Oppenheimer performed like a 2-hour superhero flick. Breaking multiple box office records and pretty much sweeping the Oscars, Oppenheimer cemented its legacy. Filled to the brim with great moments that'll go down in cinematic history, I wanted to talk about what I would call the best scene in the entire film. When it comes to Oppenheimer, I tend to see people gravitate towards one scene in particular when they talk about their favorite part of the movie. That scene being Oppenheimer's victory speech. Now don't get me wrong, this scene is fantastic. It's haunting. It shows the inner turmoil and guilt that Oppenheimer is feeling after his life's work is put into action in both Hiroshima and Nagasaki while the rest of the country celebrates. It's a powerful scene that features imagery that captures the horrors and consequences of war. But what if I told you that that's not the scene I'll be talking about today? I saw Oppenheimer in IMAX the weekend it released, and it's an experience that I'll never forget. From the moment the movie begins, the way the story is presented in a non-linear fashion, interpolated with fire and atom imagery, immediately commanded my attention. A blink and you'll miss it type feeling. It's hard to explain, but the film had such a frantic, claustrophobic pace from the very first second. I mentioned that this movie is 3 hours long, but I also didn't mention how not a single one of those minutes is wasted. Every single second in this film is crucial in understanding the motives, the character, and the psyche of J. Robert Oppenheimer. The experience was so immersive in an IMAX theater that at moments I forgot I was even watching a movie. I talked about how the film just gives off this feeling of urgency because it played a huge role in hooking me in immediately, which in turn led to one powerful scene that stuck with me. The scene that I'm going to talk about here today happens only 7 minutes into the movie and plays a huge part in setting the tone for the rest of the film. I'm talking about the moment we first hear this. A scene where there's no dialogue, no other characters as the focus other than Oppenheimer himself. Just one masterful montage featuring the brilliant score from Ludwig Göransson blasting through the speakers as we see Oppenheimer taking in the experience at the University of Göttingen where he studied theoretical physics. Again, not a single word spoken in this scene, just powerful sounds and visuals to pull you in and officially transport you into the mind of J. Robert Oppenheimer. Before I fully get into the beauty of this scene though, I want to talk about how perfectly it's set up by the scene that comes just before it. Prior to the montage set to Ludwig Göransson's Can You Hear the Music, we see Oppenheimer having a conversation with physicist Niels Bohr, who was visiting the University of Cambridge to give a lecture. Bohr advises an unhappy and depressed Oppenheimer to study theoretical physics in Göttingen before offering some important words of wisdom to our titular character. At this point in his life, Oppenheimer isn't exactly lighting the world on fire, no pun intended, with his labs or mathematics, which his professor Patrick Blackett constantly scolds him for. Niels Bohr tells Robert that algebra is like sheet music. The important thing isn't can you read the music, it's can you hear it. He then asks Oppenheimer if he can hear the music, to which he responds yes. There's many ways to interpret this scene, but the way I understood it was Niels was asking Oppenheimer if he had an intuitive understanding of physics rather than just a textbook understanding. When he's asking him if he can hear the music, he's asking him if he has an inherent passion for physics beyond books and calculations. This leads perfectly into the scene that's the topic of this video. We cut to Oppenheimer soaking in his new environment and also his path to becoming the theoretical physicist that eventually made him the father of the atomic bomb. Keep in mind that during this scene, Oppenheimer is still very young and very much finding himself. One of the reasons why this scene hits so hard is because of the sense of discovery, the sense of wonder. Just a few minutes before this, we saw Oppenheimer always butting heads with his professor to the point where he was actually going to poison him via an apple. He clearly wasn't happy with what he was doing, but here he found his purpose. I'm going to keep saying this a lot, but all of this is conveyed without any words being spoken. The visuals and the music speak for themselves. And of course, I can't praise Cillian Murphy enough for his performance in this film. Too often in this movie, we see the camera focus closely on Oppenheimer's face, and Murphy conveys so much emotion without even needing to speak, and he does it plenty here. In a scene that only lasts 98 seconds, Christopher Nolan lets the film speak for itself. Shots of Oppenheimer sitting in class beginning to understand, shots of him outside of class beginning to study everything around him, such as paintings, the fireplace, and perhaps more intriguing to me, glasses. I don't know why, but this particular part of the scene always stood out to me because of how obscure it was. I mean, it was obviously in there for a reason, and I know it had something to do with theoretical physics. But my first reaction was, why was he breaking those glasses? It's such a small part of an already small scene, but it truly made me feel the wonder that Oppenheimer had in this particular moment. This Reddit post explained the meaning behind that small part better than I ever could for those interested. But it all crescendos so beautifully alongside the music. The music grows stronger as the scene goes on. I always found this fitting because what we see visually is Oppenheimer gaining knowledge, therefore gaining power. This whole montage is his time at Göttingen where he got his doctorate in physics. Another important part of this scene though is the fact that Oppenheimer was still very much homesick. Despite finding his purpose, he hadn't found a home. And him wanting to go back home ultimately set the rest of the film in motion. And of course, throughout all of this, we continue to get beautiful images of atoms interpolated with the rest of the scene. Maybe it was just the fact that I saw this in an IMAX theater and the loudness of it all just hit me harder. But man, even after the 3 hours were over, I went home thinking about this scene. I mean, I was thinking about the whole movie because it was a masterpiece, but my mind kept going back to the sense of wonder that this scene brought. This is also the last time in the movie that we see an Oppenheimer without any kind of power, as the next time we see him, he's already setting in motion the expansion of quantum physics research in the US by teaching in California. There is this common theme throughout Oppenheimer about the ethical nature of developing the atomic bomb. Is Oppenheimer guilty? Is he morally corrupt? Well, this scene hits harder after you finish the movie and see just how much guilt Oppenheimer carried for the remainder of his life. It reminds you that at one point, J. Robert Oppenheimer was just a young, ambitious man who wanted to explore the unknown. This young Robert just wanted purpose. The scene in question here displays almost a sense of innocence, for lack of a better term. Perhaps Oppenheimer always wanted to change the world, but maybe not in the way that he ended up doing so. And this exact thought is touched upon at the very end of the movie when we finally hear the conversation between him and Einstein. I don't know how I managed to drag out a video of this length for such a short scene, but it's something that I wanted to talk about in depth since I first saw the movie. In a movie with perhaps the strongest cast ever put together, it was a short, dialogue-less scene featuring only Cillian Murphy that has stuck with me the most. I'm sure we can pick apart any scene in this movie and find deeper meaning behind it. That's the product of great filmmaking. The question was if Robert could hear the music, and he proved without a shadow of a doubt that he could. But in the end, Oppenheimer heard the same song far too often and eventually grew tired of the music.